It's funny how some of the most interesting places are the ones most people just kind of glance over, Like they have these fascinating stories, but they're kind of hidden in plain sight. That's what we're talking about today, these hidden gems. And the one we're diving into today, well, let's just say it's pretty captivating. We're talking about the Fergus Falls State Hospital in Minnesota.
Okay.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. A hospital. What's so exciting about that?
Right.
But trust me on this one. This isn't your average run-of-the-mill medical center. We're going deep into some excerpts about it, like its history, its architecture, even what the grounds are like today. So by the time we're done with this deep dive, you'll know more about this place than most folks who live right nearby. So this whole story, it starts way back in the late 19th century. Our source calls it a new era for mental health care, and that's where the Fergus Falls State Hospital comes in. It seems like it was way ahead of its time, but what was actually happening back then in that field?
Well, that's a great question to start with. You see, back then, there was this growing movement to, change how things were done. They wanted to move away from just isolating people with mental illnesses, confining them. The idea was to create environments that were, more humane, more focused on actually helping them heal.
It was a whole new way of thinking.
Exactly. And the Fergus Falls State Hospital, it was built right in the middle of all this change in 1888, and it was seen as really progressive because it embraced this whole new approach. So instead of being hidden away, it was designed to be a place of healing, a place of hope.
Wow. And get this, they used something called the Kirkbride Plan to design it. That just sounds so ahead of its time. What's the story there?
Oh, the Kirkbride Plan, that was revolutionary, honestly. It was all based on the ideas of this psychiatrist, Dr. Thomas Kirkbride. He believed that the architecture of a building, the whole environment, it could actually play a huge role in patients' recovery.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine this. You've got these big, spacious buildings filled with sunlight, fresh air just pouring in. And outside, beautiful grounds, gardens, the whole works. That was Kirkbride's vision. He wanted to create a space that felt more like a sanctuary than an institution. And the Fergus Falls State Hospital, well, it's like a textbook example of that philosophy put into action.
That's remarkable. And our source mentions that they designed the hospital to be a self-sufficient community, which kind of makes me think of something out of a history book, What did that look like in reality?
It's amazing to think about, right? They had it all figured out. They had their own farms on the grounds to provide fresh food for everyone. They had gardens, workshops where patients could, learn skills, work with their hands, actually contribute to the community.
That's incredible. So it wasn't just about, keeping them occupied, but giving them something meaningful to do.
Exactly. It wasn't just busy work. Kirkbride believed that having a sense of purpose, feeling like you're accomplishing something, that was a crucial part of the healing process. And I think that's something we often forget about today.
It sounds like they were really trying to rethink how mental health care was approached from the ground up. Like you said, not just a building, but a whole community designed for healing and recovery. But, let's talk a little bit more about the building itself, because the architecture, from what I'm hearing, is a huge part of this whole story, right? Speaking of the hospital's design, I was reading the excerpt earlier, and they use some pretty evocative language to describe it, like imposing towers and sweeping wings. It really makes you want to see this place.
Oh, it's quite something. The Kirkbride style. You see, it's all about symmetry. You have that central administration building and then those long wings just extending outwards on either side. They often design them in a staggered or tiered formation too, which adds to the effect.
So it's not just about aesthetics. They were really going for a certain feeling with this design.
Precisely. The idea was to create a sense of balance, a sense of order, which they believed would have a calming effect on the patients, a sense of stability in what could be a very chaotic time.
It makes sense when you put it like that. And there's another detail here that caught my eye. The source mentions Romanesque Revival elements in the design. Now, I have to admit, architecture isn't exactly my forte. What does that even mean?
Good question. Romanesque Revival. Think back to those grand old buildings in Europe, from the Middle Ages, massive stone structures. That's the essence of it. In the case of the Fergus Falls State Hospital, you see it in those beautiful bricks they used, the intricate stonework, that feeling of solidity, of permanence.
So it's almost like those design elements were meant to evoke a certain feeling as well.
Exactly. It wasn't just for show, you see. Those elements were meant to convey a sense of strength, of stability, a reassurance that you were entering a place that was built to last, a place that would be there for you, a place of permanence and care.
There are so many layers to this. It's fascinating how much thought went into every detail, from the layout of the building to the materials they used. But the building is only one part of the experience. Our source also talks about the hospital grounds and the feeling they evoke even today. What can you tell us about that?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. Remember how the whole Kirkbride Plan emphasized using the environment, the surroundings as part of the healing process? Well, the grounds of the Fergus Falls State Hospital are a perfect example of that. Even though the hospital itself isn't functioning anymore, you walk those grounds today and you still feel it, that sense of peace, that tranquility that was so central to its original purpose.
It must be quite an experience to walk those grounds, to feel the weight of that history all around you. It really is amazing, isn't it? How even after all these years, that sense of peace, of tranquility, it's still there.
It really is.
It kind of makes you think about how much we still value those kinds of spaces today, places where you can just kind of escape the noise and the busyness of everything.
Absolutely.
And our source mentions that locals actually use the grounds for that very reason. They go for walks there, walk their dogs. Imagine that, just stumbling upon this grand, historic place on your afternoon stroll. What a story to tell.
It's almost like even though the building's original purpose has changed, it's still serving the community in a way. It's become this place where people can connect with nature, with history, even just with themselves. It's really quite beautiful when you think about it.
It really is. Just goes to show you that these old places, they still have so much to offer, so much to teach us.
Absolutely. And, it makes you wonder, what if we applied those same principles today?
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. The Kirkbride Plan, it was all about incorporating nature, light, a sense of tranquility into the healing process. Those are things that are still so relevant, maybe even more so in today's world. What if we designed our hospitals, our healthcare facilities, with those same principles in mind?
That's a really interesting thought. Maybe there's something to be said for learning from the past, even as we move forward.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know about you, but I am definitely adding the Fergus Falls State Hospital to my list of places to visit. This deep dive has been fascinating. We started with what seemed like a simple question about an old hospital in Minnesota and ended up uncovering this whole pivotal moment in the history of mental health care.
It just goes to show that you never know where these deep dives will take us.
That's for sure.